All right, joining me now here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is Mariame Kaba. Mariame is a Chicago-based organizer, educator, and writer. She is the founder and director of Project NIA, a group working to end youth incarceration. She is the writer of the blog Prison Culture, which you can find at usprisonculture.com. You can also follow her on Twitter at Prison Culture. Mariame, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's begin our discussion today by discussing the horrific prosecution of Marissa Alexander. If listeners aren't aware, please describe for them what was Marissa Alexander convicted of, and why is she still facing another trial coming up in the future?
Great. So Marissa Alexander is a mother of three, and she basically is a survivor of domestic violence who is married to a man named Rico Gray, who admitted in deposition that he had been an abuser and that he'd abused every single woman that he had been with. Anyway, she comes home to get some materials from her house. She had just had a baby 9 days prior to that. Baby had been born prematurely, and the thought was that somehow child being premature had something to do with the abuse that she'd suffered. She goes into her house, tries to get stuff to get out. The husband continues to threaten her. She goes back into the house, and she's got a licensed gun. She gets the gun. She fires a warning shot, a single warning shot, upwards into a wall to stop her abusive partner from basically, coming after her again so that she can leave the house. She causes absolutely no injury. She has no previous any sort of record. And despite that, she is unable to claim under Florida, because that's where this is taking place. She's unable to claim self-defense as it relates to using the stand your ground law that a lot of people have probably heard of through the Trayvon Martin case. So she's arrested, she's prosecuted, and she's jailed. She gets a sentence of 20 years, mainly due to Florida's mandatory minimum sentencing laws that are very, very tough on attempted murder or even attempted manslaughter charges. And so she ends up basically being sentenced, having the judge have no discretion whatsoever in her sentencing, and she's sentenced to 20 years. She then gets locked up. This is all happening in around 2010. She spends almost 3 years behind bars until an appellate court decides that she actually, there were improper jury instructions given during the time of deliberation, which made it appear as though she had to actually prove that, she was innocent, instead of the other way around, where the state had to actually prove her guilt. So after a few months of going back and forth, she's actually her first conviction is overturned at the end of September of 2013, and then on the end of November of 2013, I think it was probably on Thanksgiving, she's actually released on bond, and she's currently under house arrest. And her new trial, her retrial, will be on July 28th of this year. And the short version is that we recently heard over this past weekend that Angela Corey, who is the prosecutor in this case, is now going to ask for a 60-year mandatory minimum if she's convicted again this time in July. Because she can, and she can ask for 60 years because you can do 20 years concurrently instead of 20 years consecutively. So that's where we are now. And people will notice Angela Corey's name probably and recognize it because they'll recognize her as the person who prosecuted George Zimmerman in the Trayvon Martin, in the George Zimmerman killing of Trayvon Martin, and then she also is the person who was the prosecutor on the Jordan Davis
case,
on the trial there, and the Dunn Michael Dunn's, who's the killer of Jordan Davis.
Wow, and there's so much to dive into here. It's so, again, unbelievably ridiculous of the fact that if she actually would have pointed the gun at him and killed her abusive partner, that she probably would be fine. But then again, she's an African American woman. Yeah. Who knows how the racist jury system in Florida would actually work? But at least legally speaking, she could have blown him away and been, you can stand your ground. But she fired a warning shot. She didn't want to kill. Yeah. She just wanted to get us to escape. Exactly. And for that, she's was sentenced to 20 years. And then you have this crazy ass prosecutor trying to, again, just this vindictiveness. I mean, of this that wants to just go, I have to retry this again. Okay, fine. I'm going for 60 years. It's so, there's so much evil on every single solitary level of this.
Well, I think the thing that folks should pay attention to is first and foremost, and I think people don't think about this enough, the incredible amount of discretion that prosecutors have and the incredible amount of power that they have, the power to set your charges, the power to be able to ask for tons and tons of time. They just have enormous power within our system, and often are in positions where they are actually abusing their power. And in the case of Angela Corey in particular, we definitely see an abuse of power in her case. And we see the way that she's very, very reluctant to use quote-unquote race in the affirmative in any case, but she's always happy to use it against somebody that she's actually prosecuting who is a black person. So it's really, you see all of the different kinds of layers to this. This case is very, very important because it also shows the ways in particular that women of color are criminalized for self-defense, when others can use self-defense and actually use that as a basis to get off of their particular case. So you see people who are white or white identified who can use self-defense when they're quote-unquote threatened, because the idea is that they should be threatened, and they should particularly be threatened when black people are on the other side of that case. But for black people, no, in fact, we don't actually have any selves that we should be defending, and so therefore we become more and more criminalized. Our deaths are less seen as valid, but also when we are the ones who are trying to be like, oh my God, we were in the crisis and we're fearful, nobody believes that.